Well, Brandenburg is currently facing a transition process for the whole industry. Look at the mobility sector, where we are changing from the old engine technology to electromobility, which means that there is a lot of transition for the individual companies. Certain companies will actually vanish from the market, others will come up. And in that sense, companies which are newly established in a country are kind of a fresh blood doping, so to say, and so we definitely depend that we have these startups because they are the representatives for the innovation process in Brandenburg. I think we have two different layers of problems there with respect to entrepreneurship. One is mentality, one is venture capital. Mentality insofar as the American way of life, if you fail with an enterprise, to say, so what? And it is actually regarded as a positive thing in your CV. That is a mentality which is not existing here in Europe. There, a failure is a failure and is regarded as something negative. And what we have to enhance is the change of mentality in that respect. And that means also psychologically to back them up, really to take that risk, to go for their own enterprise, and that from the very beginning, even from education already onwards to the final step of really joining the market. The second thing is the accessibility of venture capital. We have countries where venture capital is much easier accessible than here. Take, for instance, Israel, or take Scandinavia. There the mentality is already different, and that's one of the tasks where the state has to step in, at least for the time being, to provide the necessary financial support so that this is not the critical, not the pivotal problem of setting up your own enterprise. The biggest advantage of European projects is that it does represent problem solving like it is known from science already for a couple of years. We are facing problems which cannot be solved by one individual just on its own. The term interdisciplinarity is something which is more known to the field of science than actually to the field of economics. Nonetheless, it has the same importance also in this economical field. And if we do bring people together who have in the same attitude in principle, on the other side, to make them exchange their personal experiences, that we don't have to repeat every failure for each individual again, but that every individual is allowed to make new mistakes, but can avoid those which have been made by others before. I think this kind of cooperation is supported by these European projects, and that makes them important. Well, I think the instruments have completely different character. To some extent, it's a question of the siting, so to provide rooming at reasonable rates in terms of incubators, in terms of accelerators. And we are in the fortunate situation that right at the moment I'm aware of at least 5 projects in different parts of Brandenburg where these kind of institutions are being built and will actually join the network in a couple of months, so that those young enterprises do have privileged situations to have the first steps, to have a support for the first years. It is also necessary actually to force them to leave these kind of incubators and accelerators after a certain time, because if that becomes their permanent address, then you stop this dynamic process. So they must overcome the hurdles of the beginning and must then be able to survive on the open market. So placing, siting is one of the things where we can support that. The other one I already mentioned is the question of financial supports in offering grants which are not a load in terms that you have to pay back everything in a certain time, but that there are special regulations in place where this money is easier accessible and also affordable for these young enterprises. Brandenburg, I think, has the chance to play a much bigger economical role within the Federal Republic of Germany than it actually has played before. The reason for that is that the question of the ecological footprint becomes more and more important. CO2 footprint of products, of manufacturing process becomes one of the key elements for the assessment of the quality of a new enterprise. There we are providing most probably the best starting position in comparison to many other countries in Germany. We have the highest rate of installed new energy here, of so-called green energy. That makes us more attractive for this purpose, and that way I'm pretty much convinced that this will attract more and more also our young people to set up their enterprises here, because there they can provide the proof that they have a reasonable ecological footprint, and that way I'm absolutely convinced that our economical role within Germany will rise.